Tuesday, August 11th, 2022 at 3:42 p.m. I call this meeting to order. Can we take a moment to go around for introductions, starting to my left?
Joshua Gill.
Nathan Spencer.
Tallulah Payomokaye.
Linda Davis.
Jennifer Truman.
Thank you. How are you all doing today?
Good, thanks.
I know we have a slight abbreviated agenda today, so let's just jump right into it. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve June's minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and properly seconded to approve June's meetings. Everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The ayes have it. June meeting minutes have been approved. I know that there is one addition to the agenda. Is that correct, David?
Madam Chair, that is correct. We do have one item, which is a review of a draft presentation for the annual report from the Transit Authority. So staff has prepared the information as instructed by the board. We just wanted to run that presentation by you quickly. It is in draft form. We can make any changes suggested. At that time, we would also make a memo to go with that, and we could place that on a future council agenda at your discretion.
All right, perfect. So then we will add that to, where do you think we should throw that in the agenda?
So we have the other items. We have public comment. We have the public hearing, obviously. We could put that directly after the Southern BRT item. That is the most critical, just information, even though it's information, that is a critical item. So we could do it right after the route committee report, if you like.
How long will it take to discuss?
The annual report, I think I can get through that between 7 and 10 minutes.
You want to do it now?
I can do that.
No, it's the, is there, or you have an addition?
Yeah.
Okay, what's that? Sorry.
Just that sorry, catching myself up. Counselor Branch reached out to me. He is looking for an update on our request around open radios. So he was asking that we get an update from staff on that point.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Okay, so then we will put, since we have about a little over 15 minutes, do you want to go over your piece of it, portion of it? And then before we jump into the staff information items, ask if we have any additional information that Councilman Branch was looking for.
You want to advance? You want me to just stay here?
Yep.
Be good? Okay. All right, so again, this is the Raleigh Transit Authority work plan. Traditionally, other boards and commissions have done kind of a brief recap of accomplishments to date, really what's happened over the last year, and then really projected forward to the main items that the body will be undertaking that year. And council uses that as a gauge of, what types of activities will be coming and what can we expect to come before us potentially for adoption. Next slide. So some of the accomplishments that we were going to highlight for the board in 22 was certainly our electric buses and charging stations. I'm not going to read these slides. We've presented most of this information to you sometime throughout the year. But we do have 5 electric buses, and we're cranking up our charging stations to a 14 bus capacity. So we are looking at certainly expanding our electric footprint within the bus portfolio. Next slide. Always good to have slides of exactly what we're talking about. So certainly bottom left is that shows how our buses are stacked for charging. And then obviously some of our electric buses in action. The other one is 2022 was also a large year for CNG buses. We received 28 additional compressed natural gas buses, which replaced 28 older diesel vehicles. As you can see that we've had over $2 million in fuel savings because of the compressed natural gas, especially during the recent spikes in diesel expense. And certainly we've seen a large amount of greenhouse gas emission reductions, looking at about 16,000 metric tons. I don't think we have it today, but we have a cool graphic of that staff put together. It shows what 16,000 metric tons looks like, and it's like Moore Square Park. And if you go up 1,800 square feet, which is about a third of a mile, that's what 16,000 metric tons looks like. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, go back one. We are still awaiting the Raleigh Water Bioenergy Project, anaerobic digestion project that they're doing. Once that's up and running, they'll also be producing natural gas. We'll have a contract with Raleigh Water for their gas, as well as, if all goes well, we'll have a transfer fee that we would pay the utility that actually has the gas in their pipeline. It's not the actual gas. I mean, they pump in so many cubic feet, and we just pump out so many cubic feet on our end. And so there's just a transfer fee there. All right, next slide. And again, our CNG buses in action. If you've ever wondered what the numbers are on the vehicles, if you look at the left-hand screen there, you see 2201. So that was the first bus we received in 22. If you start looking at before 19, we didn't have that number sequence, but everything from 19 forward carries that designation. So you can tell the year and the series number it was received in that year. All right, next slide. I'm sorry?
It's 22 years. Do we have any 19s running still?
Well, 2019.
Oh, 2019. Okay. Scared me for a second.
Yeah. The 22 represents the last 2 years of the decade, but we, like I said, we started that I think in 2019. I think 2018 backwards still had the old 1300 series numbers. I think that actually started probably with like I don't know 1,000 or something, or probably less than that. I'm not sure, but I've seen it go from probably the late 1200s all the way up through early 1300s series until we went to the 19 designating the year from that point forward. Anyway, just a little trivia for buses. Sorry. Again, accomplishments in 2022, Wake Bus Rapid Transit, some of the things we've got going on there for BRT. Again, you all have been updated on these, and you'll certainly get an update again today. New Bern Avenue BRT full funding grant agreement expected this month, as some of you may have seen via social media. While we did get the federal allocation, the work to actually secure those funds in a full funding grant agreement for expenditure is a lot of work. And so that has been, looks like if all goes well, that has been accomplished, and we should have that completely completed certainly this month. New Bern Avenue is approaching completion of final design as well. We are in the midst of right-of-way currently, with construction bid expected in early 23, and construction starting sometime probably mid-23. Southern Corridor approaching 10%, and we're going to go out for the small starts ratings application this month. I think that's somewhere in between the 20th and 30th. I can't remember the exact date, but it's coming up very quickly. Western Corridor, we're still watching all of the projects along that corridor and advancing design where we can. But certainly our primary concern right now is Southern, but we'll be switching over to Western pretty quickly as we advance that. And then the Northern Corridor, we've talked about that. Currently that terminates about Crabtree Creek. Probably not a federal project under its current designation, so we're looking at ways, we can develop that project to meet federal requirements for a CIG project. And certainly Campo's revamp of the Wake Transit Plan looked at North Hills Midtown, as well as Triangle Town Center, as possible termini for future BRT corridors. So both of those areas, as well as Wake Tech North, is within the service area, within the study area that we'll be looking at. Really just getting that kicked off and kind of looking at fatal flaws So at this point, we're trying to look at where we know we can't go. And then once we know where we can't go, we'll try to hone in, where are the opportunities that may lie ahead. Next slide. So again, just one of our renderings of our stations there along New Bern Avenue. This is the one that has the multi-use path behind the station, along with the BRT dedicated lane, and that would be a right-hand BAT, or business access transit. So next slide. So FY23, you remember our retreat. It's been a while ago now. Well, not too long ago, but time flies. But 1 through 7 there, I'm not going to read these. You all know those well. We've gone over them several times. But by rank, those were the initiatives that the board said that it wanted staff to, the board as well as staff, to undertake in the new fiscal year, or FY23. If there's any questions regarding any of those bullets, I'll certainly answer those. If not, we'll go ahead. Also, we had partnerships. Certainly there are things out there that are certainly important to the transit authority that that can't be accomplished alone. Obviously, our interest cross many departments and organizations to make improvement. So some of those, such as land use planning, affordability, or housing affordability, considering unhoused populations, certainly coordinating with our regional partners. All of these things are, elements that the board said were important for us to recognize and to incorporate as we developed our work, implemented any of our work plan items. Next slide. And then there's the Wake Transit Plan. So the Wake Transit Plan are the projects that either are designated for us because they're within our jurisdiction, and it's assumed that we will construct or either operate those services because they fall within the city of Raleigh, or we are project sponsors, such as under the BRT programs with the New Bern Avenue as well as the Southern Corridor. But things that we're looking at for continued funding and implementation in FY23 is the Go Raleigh Operations and Maintenance Facility expansion. So that's administration expansion as well as maintenance expansion. The maintenance expansion will really concentrate on electrification and those types of elements that will need to be installed and maintained long-term as our electric fleet grows. Our East Raleigh Park and Ride design will begin. So that's out at New Hope Road and right behind the CVS there at New Hope and New Bern Avenue. AEDA Operations and Maintenance Facility. So we're embarking upon a property purchase now. That's not complete, but we hope that will be in the near future. And then as soon as that's secured, we'll be working on design of that facility, and we do have funds to advance that project through design, but we do not have full funding at this time, but certainly we are expecting that, I think, through 25. Building of our first of 7 enhanced transit stops. So I think we've gone through that before. Enhanced transit stop has things like real-time passenger information, larger shelters, more bench seating. So those stops that really have a larger number of boardings, making sure that we provide that comfort that can accommodate not just 2 or 3 or 4 people, but 6, 8, 10 people at a single stop. And then 127 bus stop improvements are currently in some form of design, real estate acquisition, or easement acquisition and or construction. Next slide. And then I think this is our final slide, 23 adopted projects of ending up with our Wake Transit BRT. Again, our Western Corridor final design cost was adopted in FY22, and our Southern Corridor BRT final design cost will be adopted in FY20, or was adopted in the FY23 programming. That might be it, Andrea, or might be one more. Go Raleigh initiatives. So we do receive discretionary funds, my fault. So we do have some projects that we accomplish with just our regular formula funding. A large amount of that funding goes towards our operating budget and fixed cost, but we do hold some of those funds aside for capital projects as well. We will be replacing all of our signs that are not of the new Go Raleigh signs, so there are still some old signs, non-conforming signs out there. So the first bullet will replace all of those older signs with new signs, as well as make sure that our existing signs, that even if they're there correctly, that they're not crooked or in the wrong place or whatever. So there'll be a check on all of that. We're looking at the ADA operations and maintenance facility receiving a new parking lot. I know that's not a major deal for most people, but for us that's exciting because that site has needed a new parking lot for a while, and it's going to take us a while before we can get that new facility built. And we want to make sure that that ADA facility out on South Blunt Street is a good place to at least arrive to. It has seen its better years, but hopefully it's going to last a few more as we need that facility to make it until we can get the new facility construction. And then an educational marketing campaign to be completed in FY23 as well. And again, that'll come from some of our formula funds that the city of Raleigh receives. Next one, Andrea. And that was the last one. I missed it by one, so my apologies there. But again, what we're looking for is you don't have to tell us today if you want to send us an email, or you can tell me now and I can write it down. What we'll do, again, is put that into also a memo format, and then we'll be working with the board to get you on the council agenda for report and recommendation of the Raleigh Transit Authority.
When will we be talking to the council?
That is certainly up to the board, but I would think that we would be looking at the second meeting in September or the first meeting in October.
Where is the ADA parking lot now?
So our ADA facility is at 1430 South Blunt Street. It is directly behind our field services building, which is at the intersection of South Wilmington Street and City Farm Road. It is right beside what used to be the Cargill facility before they took that down.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty much a heavy industrial on that side of Wilmington. Well, it used to be heavy industrial. Now it's mostly warehouse. But yes, in that area right there.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions?
Can you put these slides on board docs so we can look at them?
Yes, most definitely.
And then I had a question about the bus stop improvements. So it's 127 currently in progress, but I think I know I get a lot of questions from people about what's that number compared to how many bus stops or how many we did in the past year or the past 5 years. So I think if you could expand some context, like it's 127 for FY23, how many was it last year or the year before? And how many are left that need some improvement?
Yeah. Yes. And we can certainly provide that context. Just off the top of my head, generally speaking, we've done around 30 to 40 a year. That 127 will take time to construct because we can only let maybe 20 to 30 in a contract just because of cash flow. And really, we do keep our contract smaller because we're able to get smaller firms. And they actually give us, great service. We've got a couple of smaller construction contractors that love this work because it's really scalable for them. And we also extend our time period that they can actually construct them. So we used to do like a 90-day. Now it's more like 120 to 100 and probably 60 days. That way they can work it into slow periods over several months. And get those facilities in place. But it does offer a great opportunity for smaller contractors, and we've had good success with that. But as far as total bus stops, we have 1,400. So we've got about 300 in the ground currently, so that would take that around 400 or so. But another way to think about that is, so out of all of our boardings, about 85 to 87% of all of our boardings currently occur at covered bus stops. So the thing about bus stops is that we have a standard for bus stops of every quarter mile in an urban environment, and you'll go up beyond a quarter mile to maybe a half mile in a suburban environment. But that's just our spacing, and that's done for continuity and for consistency of service, so that when you get off of a stop or you look for a stop, you know that one's going to be generally every quarter mile or so. But it doesn't mean that everybody boards at those. We have some stops that have maybe 3 boardings a month or 4 boardings a month. The reality is that most of our boardings happen at about 30% of our stops. Really about 80% of our boardings happen about 35% of our stops. And the other 20% are spread everywhere. And the reason for that is that 20% that's spread everywhere are all still going to common origins. Whether that's Crabtree Valley Mall, whether that's downtown, whether that, those major trip generators, and then they're coming back to that major trip generator to board as well. And we can certainly provide heat maps or everything like that, and if the route committee ever wants to see that information, we can provide that. So again, I know that 1,400 is kind of everybody's thinks like, oh my goodness, we've got so much work to do. But when you look at it per boarding, like how many people or what percentage of our ridership is actually boarding at a covered stop, we're approaching that 90% pretty fast, so that we can say, 90% of all of our boardings are actually occurring at covered bus stops. So that's a good fact to know.
Yeah,
but
that
we can
context-
certainly provide.
That context is super helpful when
yeah.
looking at a number. It's hard to know what it is. And so just by adding some of that, I think that really helps clarify, and understanding the change from percent of like where we are now with covered boardings being 85%, like do we get up to 86 or 87 when we add this 100? I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, and we can actually provide those variables of, if you want to make it by a percentage or two, what does that take as far, in order to meet that threshold? And I'll give a lot of that credit to Matthew Van Hook, which is over there. He's done a lot of work with our shelters and developing, that methodology and using our automatic passenger counters to know where all of those trip origins are coming from, and us getting those facilities in the right place. So, yeah. And I know that we've got a pretty in-depth presentation, so if the route committee would like for us to bring that back to review at some time, we'll be happy to do that. But yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, when doing this to council, I think just follow the model that the housing neighborhoods uses for affordable housing, where they say this was the goal, this is where we're at, this is how many we've done, because that tells people really where we're at. The one comment that I had was we, in light of the news this week, we might want to maybe lighten the amount of energy we put on increased frequency on the and reduced wait times on the initiatives, because that's one that we're going to miss. Or maybe we just note it, but we note that it's one that we're not going to hit.
What's that again?
On the 2023 initiatives, our top initiative is increased frequency.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we must change that.
Yeah.
Or maybe we need to do something different.
Any other questions? Okay, so it is 4:05. Let's take a pause really quickly and jump into the public hearing for the R-Line Title 4, that's 5, 6. Equity analysis. All right. Before, after, I couldn't remember where it went. All right.
All right, so you would
Oh,
just
that's right.
open up the hearing.
Got to say it again.
See if there's any comments.
Are there any comments?
Are there anyone signed up for the?
Public hearing?
Okay.
The R-Line? All right, then I will promptly close public hearing. 4:06. Then I will open public comments. So we'll pause the meeting for public comments.
And the staff will be back in September for endorsement of the Title VI. We usually wait 30 days after the public hearing for actual endorsement, so we'll be bringing that back in September for endorsement. If you have any questions in the interim, please let us know.
Were there any online comments so far?
No, we did not receive any. We did advertise. We met our public hearing requirements for advertising, and I think we put it on social and stuff like that, but we really didn't have any comments. It was kind of a strange situation, obviously, with, had to meet that 12-month removal period, and that's what kicked this one in.
All right. Okay, so as we are in public comments, the first person is Vincent Price. Please come to the podium, state your name and email address.
Good evening. My name is Vincent Price. My email is vincentprice1449@gmail.com. And we're here to talk about the management at Go Raleigh. I sat back for months now. It is not per se Mr. Bryant. I think him and Mr. Dewberry eventually is going to work things out. But the problem at Go Raleigh amongst the drivers and the supervisor is the city employee, Reginald Caldwell. Everything they're trying to build, he's tearing it down.
Who?
Reginald Caldwell, the director of operations at Go Raleigh, city employee, he keeps throwing in our face. He's bullying the drivers and the supervisors, putting scare tactics on the new drivers, the new hirees, to where they just quit. I'm a trainer now. I've been with Go Raleigh since 2007. I had a cadet that I was training. She made a mistake. She didn't know that we physically have to report in to let them know we're here. So she got wrote up. She went into his office. He wrote up, put it in her file, and then asked her, "Are you scared of me yet?" And I'm like, wow, really? She ain't even out of class yet and you scaring the new employees. And they quitting left and right. Some of us senior drivers, including myself, are ready to go to data. We're ready to go to human resources, put in our 2-week notice, and go over the data. If you keep Reggie Caldwell down in that building at Go Raleigh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. So I know that when it comes to the operators and maybe promotions or raises or anything like that, does that, like, reports or performance reviews come into play when it comes to, like, rewarding operators, right? No?
So everything is generally done by the collective bargaining agreement. Certainly that outlines disciplinary pay over the life of the CBA and those types of activities. Mr. Caldwell, as well as supervisors, as well as the general manager and employees are all employees of TransDev. But the union workforce is covered by the collective bargaining agreement.
Assuming that there's a change in contract with management, we can assume that there may be some changes in staff management as well. Most likely.
I would say that any company coming in reviews all employees, whether that's the incumbent or whether that's a new. That's generally the time that they review things under the new contract structure. And we are certainly looking at a new contract structure. That is correct.
Okay.
So since the new management company, I mean, we've seen over the past years that we've had to have some direct interactions with TransDev. Is there any way that the new management company that comes in that we, the RTA, can meet some of them, the people who are bidding or the top bid options, so that we can explain some of the issues that we've had with the past management company and make sure that that's not issues coming in going forward with the new management company versus just having them do the bid, win the bid, get the contract, but actually get some historical data from us to talk about, best practices and making sure that this is a relationship that works for everybody.
I would certainly say that during that procurement process, if there's any questions from this body, or whether there's questions from the existing employees at Go Raleigh, we would certainly want to entertain, to present those questions in the forum, in some type of forum, whatever that might be. Exactly how that works, I can't really, I need to think through that. But can those types of questions or information be relayed? Yes, most definitely. And we want to make sure that when we get to a place where we have a short list, which we hope we're attractive enough that we have multiple proposers, that we have the opportunity to actually shortlist. And when we shortlist, I think that's the time to really hone in, what are the key questions, what are the key things that we want you to understand about this contract that are important, and, what are the key values of this organization. So, most definitely.
I think I'm thinking more of that, once we get to the short list part
Yeah.
of it, if there's an opportunity for all or some of the authority, not just to submit questions, but maybe get questions from operators to definitely, send over to the new potential management company, but also that we have an opportunity to at least meet them.
Okay.
Because we're gonna have to deal with this. We don't want,
Yeah.
that way there's a little bit of a relationship start that hopefully we can get off on a better start. Because unfortunately, Mr. Price and Sharita and Keisha, if this is about the management company, there's nothing we can do, unfortunately. You know what I'm saying? It has to come down to us changing that. The contract that the management company has with the city ties our hands as an authority to be able to enforce any of that on them. But what we can do, gratefully, that while we're waiting for that we've changed the parameters of the contract and the type of contract it is, so we have more interested people now than we had before. We had nobody interested before. We have a lot of interest now from different management companies. That gives us a better opportunity if we can get on the forefront of bringing that company in to make the situation better, explain the issues we've had in the past with scheduling, with seniority, with treatment of, operators, with respect issues, with COVID, like basically tell the management company everything. Because also what I don't want to do is a management company comes in thinking, oh, everything's good. And they get in here and we're like, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, oh my God. So I think us being on the forefront of us being able to impress what our expectations are, you know what I'm saying, can make it a better relationship.
I have a question. Mr. Price mentioned that this individual is a city employee. Is that
All of the employees at Go Raleigh are TransDev employees.
okay?
That answered that, because that was my question.
Yeah.
So he is not a city employee.
That is
Reginald
correct.
Caldwell is not a city employee.
That is correct.
Also, I think it should be noted that the union is negotiating their CBA for January of the next year, so or for next January. So there should be some opportunity for the new management company, and the union to actually have some good conversations and get rid of some of this stuff, and actually negotiate a contract that represents the drivers in a way that they need.
Right.
So
I think one thing it sucks because sometimes you have to go through the muck to get to the better side of it. But I think the one thing of all of this being brought to the forefront of the past couple of years is as we go into getting a new contract, that we can set it straight from the gate with the new people. You know what I'm saying? Because I also feel like it may be a little bit of, if they know they may not be renewing their contract, then they're kind of like, you know what I'm saying? They can say things like, are you afraid of me yet? Mm-hmm. You get what I mean? And it's not right for anybody to be treated that way, but the environment might be causing a little bit of extra something from people. So I do apologize that you all, that's what we consistently do, apologize for what you all are dealing with out there. The next public speaker.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
I do have concerns as a board and as Go Raleigh that we just say that's TransDev's issue, because we've hired TransDev to do a service for us, right?
Yeah.
And we can reach out and say, listen, these are things that we're hearing. We have concerns. Show us. I think that we need to, surely there's complaints been filed. Like, let's get records of the complaints and say, listen, like, these are records that y'all have kept as TransDev. Like, are you saying this is okay? We have hired you to do this job. We need to, like, look into it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just
Yeah,
push it
there is a
away.
structured process, for that within the CBA, as well as I can find out, if that process is being followed within CBA. I don't know that. We can't get into TransDev's personnel issues, just as we couldn't get into City of Raleigh personnel issues. That would be illegal, but we certainly can make sure that they understand the values that we want them to represent, and we'll certainly do that.
I think, yes, I hear we can't get into their personal issues, but we can say, you provide a service to us. We
That would represent our values, which
Yeah,
is
and-
most definitely.
And breathing down their neck and saying this is not okay, if this is truly what's going on.
I do agree.
If I can add, sorry,
No way.
I think having this conversation, like we've been told a lot of times on this board that we can't make comments about how HR situations are handled within TransDev, that we can only measure them on performance and things that are directly in our contract. But I think that especially as we face service reductions because of loss of bus drivers, we can't disconnect those two things anymore. Their lack of good human relations within their company has caused the service reductions, and we are holding them to a contract for service that we asked them for. So at this point, like it is in terms of like service and in terms of basic human decency, we have better standards than this. We've got to do something.
Yes, and like I say, I mean, right now we don't have we have a management fee contract, so we pay TransDev $35,000 a month, and they manage a $55 million annual contract. But that's all they get. That's it. That's $35,000 a month. So that's the kind of structure that they're working under right now. And obviously that's why we're changing that contract structure to make it more competitive as we move forward, and hopefully that will, certainly we want every firm that is qualified, to provide management services under this to bid on this contract. And so that's what we're looking forward to. I completely understand that, and I know it's frustrating, but there are legal things that we can and can't do. I mean, that's just a reality. As far as the leverage against, financial penalty, which is generally how you handle contractual relationships, we really don't have that again because we self-pay everything. Everything's passed through for the entire contract. So again, in the future, that will change.
Yeah, because they get $35,000 fee, but it's a how many $1 million contract?
55.
$55 million.
Well, it's not a contract. It's that's our
The
budget. That's
to
right.
manage, but
Yeah.
then if
Their
it's
annual
55
their annual budget is right at $375,000.
Okay, but I'm saying if it's a $55 million contract that they're managing, they get a $35,000 fee, but under that $55,000, they get to hire all their people.
What's that again?
And they get to hire their people.
Under the $35,000, they hire a general manager, a maintenance manager. They provide human services or human resources support outside of on-site
Right,
individuals.
from the $55,000. I mean, $55
$35.
million.
No, that's from the 35
So from 35,000
of a month. The 35 a month.
Right, they pay out of $35,000 a month. They pay their people out of $35,000 a month.
Correct.
And the $55 million that we're paying them, that also goes towards salaries, right?
That goes for every other employee. So if there's 300 employees, the 55 covers 298 employees. The TransDev budget covers the other two plus all overhead.
So I'm saying, but of the $55 million are those TransDev employees.
That is correct.
That's what I'm saying.
That is correct.
So you get what I'm saying? It's a $35,000 fee. It's a $55 million budget that they get to bring their own
We have no
people
leverage.
into. But you get what I'm,
Yeah, we have no leverage is what.
no, we don't have leverage. I get that under this.
Yeah.
I'm just speaking towards there. It's not just that they get a $35,000 fee and that's all they got. They got $55 million in addition to a $35,000 fee. You feel what I'm saying? It may be our money, but they get to spend it and bring their own people in and their own management people. And we don't get to manage those people because we keep hearing those are TransDev employees.
They are, yeah.
So then technically it's like that some of the, you get what neither here nor there. As we bring in the new contract, I'm hoping that we get to, because to her point and everybody else's point, some of this has become a breach of contract. Because in that contract, I would assume performance is a part of it. And employees are a part of it. And us meeting our matrices are a part of them having that contract. But if we're not meeting our matrices because we don't have the employees, because of how they manage the employees,
Correct.
then they're in breach of that contract in some way. You see what I'm saying? Aren't they?
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were trying to aim for with this new O&M contract, was putting in a lot of stuff that also sort of tracked them based on measures that we can't say whether the employees are happy, but we can say things like, are we running things on time? Are the
And we're not.
employees actually there? Are there
And they're
a
not.
number,
That's
this
what I'm
many
saying.
complaints per
We
month?
might not be
Yeah.
able to measure the warm fuzzies.
Yeah.
But we
But
can
the-
get down to the data, and the data is, are our buses arriving on time?
Correct.
Do we have employees?
Correct.
Are we keeping employees? Are we maintaining a retention of our employees?
Are there, a minimum number of complaints?
Yeah, are there a minimum
against
number of,
the-
are we running with the spirit of excellence in our performance? But
Correct.
the way the contract is being managed is affecting performance.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a breach of the contract. So I'm hoping that, I know we are where we are now, but as we go forward, that maybe there can be some language.
Oh, but I mean, those are completely two different types of contracts. So what you're talking about is where we're going, where we are now.
Trans there.
Where we are now is where we, certainly
Costs us
we,
money.
we have those types of checks and balances, but they're just not a robust, because to a certain degree, not to a certain degree, a management fee contract is much more of a partnership. It really requires that partnership between the two agencies in order to get things done. Because again, all you're paying for is a very limited amount of fixed overhead, and everything else is a direct pass-through. So under that scenario, I mean, there's a blending of really management, of really the contractor and the city to a certain degree, because you really have to share that responsibility, because if either one of you don't hold up to your side of the bargain, then everyone fails. Now, under a contract standpoint where you actually have, the O&M contract, we would hold them much more accountable, because we actually step back at that point. And we would have liquidated damages for all types of, potential activities. So it is a different structure. I'm not saying one's necessarily better than the other. I can say that from an industry standpoint, that management fee contracts have fallen out of favor, and it's very difficult to have companies come in and propose on a management fee contract. As a matter of fact, we obviously solicited, and we got one proposer last time, and so that's why we're out again. But I completely understand your concern and questions, most definitely.
To the conversation about where we're going, I know that there's been a lot of work for what's the proposals that are coming in for the bid right now. But I don't know that I have clarity on how some of the comments that we're talking about where we want to be in terms of measures on other things besides just bus performance, but HR complaints and things like that have been incorporated in that request. Is there a way for us to do that in committee or at the board? Or is that something we need to wait until we have a short list and see what people are proposing?
I would.
This is why I expressed frustration in the Finance and Policy Committee when we were selecting, when the criteria for selection for companies was 4 sentences, 4 bullet points. We need a robust criteria that we are selecting these companies on, where we can incorporate things like their track record on employee relations, where we can track things like their on-time performance and all these things, not just 4 bullet points.
No, I agree.
And have we expanded that
Not in the proposals, because we want to get the proposals in. There's 4 national companies that will bid on this project. There's 4. That's it. And we know all of them. I've worked with all of them before. And so we really want to know, what are they going to propose to us? How are they going to come help us? And then a final contract, everything that you said, that's where that needs to be. We're going to put that contract together, and it's going to be a tight contract. It's going to be a great contract. But that's where that needs to be. A proposal it's going to get you some of the way there.
Right,
And
but-
certainly we have put those values and those concerns within the proposal. But at the end of the day, when we shortlist, which we'll have 2 or 3 of those 4 vendors, hopefully, maybe we can get rid of one, or we might just interview all 4. But that's the time that we're going to do that. I'm not disagreeing what you're saying. I'm just disagreeing with the timing of when you do that.
Right, but also the contract is, by the time of the contract, we've selected that company, right?
Correct.
I'm talking about before we even get there, when we are deciding which company we're going to use, we need to have the criteria in there that we're saying this is what we're deciding, who we choose based off of, and that just wasn't I think we need to ingrain this in the process.
You're
right?
talking about soiled, the fact that if we end up down there where we're going to negotiate a contract, it could be that we're dealing with, for example, TransDev that's already, not that we will, but that we have a TransDev-like company where the performance and the measures are already bad.
Yes.
So now we're negotiating that they'll be penalized on this stuff, even though what we're getting is a bad option no matter what.
I
Right.
think what he's also trying to say is that in the process of selecting, in the organization, the management company's mind, they know what we're looking for. And it's not just
Correct.
you hit you're doing this, these 4 bullet points, but what's your employee relations like? What's this like? So you know where we're coming from.
Yeah,
and
those
what
are
we
the
really-
questions that we ask within the RFP.
Okay.
They should be addressing those as part of the RFP. Now, we did not necessarily put them on the list of we're gonna grade you on this, this, and this. We used larger categories more generally. That way, it gives us the discretion or it gives the selection panel the discretion to really read and interpret those proposals in a way that they can make sure that they pull out the cream of the crop per se. Again, it's just
How do we know
a
they're the cream of the crop?
it's just a spin on methodology. I mean, like I say again, we can do it a bunch of different ways. I'm just expressing my
I think
opinion.
I was really I wasn't necessarily critiquing the way in which you guys are handling
Yeah.
I was just speaking from not having a complete understanding of how it is currently being handled. If we could get some of that, and maybe it's in finance and policy, I don't want to put something on your plate if you don't want it there, but I just, I don't have a lot of clarity about what has been asked to be addressed to be able to know, we want to write some questions. I don't want to repeat a question that's already in the RFP, for example. So I want to be able to speak intelligently and have enough information.
like 130 pages. So,
I know.
mean,
So I think just
a lot there.
a high level, we've asked, like you said, you chunked it into categories. If we get a high level, we asked about these categories of things.
Yeah.
We're getting some good answers about these categories of things. We've given this to the selection committee, whatever it is. Or it would be good to know if all 4 of the major companies in the country are not interested in answering this type of questions. That's also information that would be useful for us to know and for the operators in the room to know.
Which is why I think it's important for one of us to make sure that we're in each of those meetings. Even if it's not all of us, but somebody from the Transit Authority should be in all the interviews that we're doing with the management company. So that the questions, because we have the knowledge that they don't have, that maybe staff is not gonna think to ask, we have a different perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And we can bring some of the questions that the operators have ourselves and be like, okay, now we can bring it back to the board and say, hey, this is how we felt about this company. We can make sure that we ask, how are you with your employee relations? And then gauge from how they answer us. Because you can put I wish it were better described on the paper, but people can make something sound good on paper. But when they're saying it to you, you can get a different feeling of whether or not this is really what you living by, or are you saying this because it sounds good. So I think that as we move forward, we need to make sure that that's happening at the very bare minimum, that somebody, or at least 1 or 2 people from the authority are in each of the interviews.
I was on a review panel for another agency a couple of years ago, and they had board members there as well. Again, they were on the side and just providing some general feedback. They wouldn't talk directly with necessarily the proposers, but certainly with the review panel, and just if they needed clarification on something. So those types of things we can certainly work on, most definitely.
The Finance and Policy Committee was, when we last met, we reviewed with David Walker, who was going to be on the committee or the panel, the
Correct.
review panel, there wasn't really discussion about whether or not somebody from our authority ought to sit in on the actual interviews. I think that's a great idea. I think, especially given the fact that every meeting we're hearing the complaints from our operators, I think it's really important for us to have a presence at those interviews.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, like I say, I've done that before, and yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it would, because we worked really hard to push staff to add a lot of language in there. If you guys, some of you might remember when we were going through the RFP, like we pushed back on them a lot, making sure that stuff is emphasized during those meetings. Because yeah, we can't talk with those who are bidding, but we can nudge the select committee on, hey, these are valuable pieces of
So
items.
no member of the authority can be on the panel? We can't talk to the,
No, because we're going to be doing some of the selection.
okay,
Yeah. And we're going to make the recommendation to city council.
okay. All right, well, let's move on to the next, public comment. Sharina McCullers, sorry.
All right, good afternoon. My email address is only1sxyrita@gmail.com. Okay, and my question is, I have several, but I want to ask David Eatman, how long you been sitting on the board, sir? How long you been with the city of Raleigh?
I've been with the city of Raleigh, will be 17 years this September.
17 years.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Wow. I've been with the Go Raleigh and Transit, the Capital Area Transit, 28 years. And I have seen a lot of general managers come in there. And the only ones that leave is the general manager and the assistant general manager. So when did Reggie become a city, a TransDev employee?
I'm sorry, I don't know that answer.
Okay. Okay, well, you said you chosen 4 companies.
The
The bid was
I know
put
that
in for
Reggie,
4?
I think, came to that position after Mr. David Walker left, if I'm not mistaken. But
And he
I
was
could be
considered
wrong.
a TransDev employee too, Mr. Walker?
That is correct.
Okay. So when TransDev, if they're not put in, so he's guaranteed to leave out too as well. Is that what you're telling me?
I'm saying that every company reviews employees upon entering a new work environment.
Okay. I noticed. Okay. Do you have a list of the 4 people that put in the bid?
We have not received bids as of yet. Generally speaking, there are 4 national companies that have contracts this large. There could be others, but generally speaking, there's 4.
So I thought they put in the bid on September.
September of last year?
September the 1st, wasn't the bid supposed to go in for this year, for TransDev, for the contract?
Okay, we did go out for an earlier management fee contract proposal, and we received 1 bidder.
One
Or
bidder?
proposal, yes.
Okay, so as soon as you get all the bids, the 4 companies, will you let us know? Or will you have it at the next meeting?
We'll certainly be updating the Transit Authority, and certainly that's in public forum, so they'll know where we are in that process and our schedule and things of that nature, most definitely.
So will be picking one that have worked with a union before?
All 4, I would imagine, have worked with unions. There's most definitely.
Okay. So whoever put in, will the city be back and putting money into the revenue to make sure that Go Raleigh drivers and employees get a living wage?
I'm trying to process that question. So you were
Will the
asking,
city of
will
Raleigh
the city of
support
Raleigh?
financially? Yes. Putting money in the revenue agreement to everyone at Go Raleigh for a living wage.
I cannot speak for council, but I know that council is certainly interested in living wages.
Okay. Alrighty. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So are our operators not making living wage?
Our operators were at 18 and now they're 20. So yeah, they were making living wage.
They gave the wages, they lift up the wages to $19 for starting pay. They went across to it. When they got to the senior drivers did not get a raise.
There was a raise for the senior drivers within the CBA already there.
It was a raise in there for the other thing too, because you had just took them to $15.
I don't think that it's appropriate for me to have a debate during public comment. But if the board would like information on the pay scale, we'll be happy to provide it.
Yes, please.
Most definitely.
Yes, please. Just to clarify, if anybody's confused, so we did put out the RFP originally under the same contract that we currently have with TransDev, the fee agreement. Nobody bid. I
Correct.
think we got one bid, but that was it. We were having a hard time getting people to want to do that because that's not the type of contract that most transit companies use anymore. It's what's the new one that we went with?
Operations and maintenance.
Right. Hopefully under that we can kind of get a little more control not control, or at least some leeway to make sure that they're doing what they need to do. But that's why we're resending it out, because the new way to go is the new operation management agreement. Nobody put out on the other one. So now we're putting it back out and changing the type of contract that it is. And under that, he's saying that we've got a lot of interest, but there are 4 major management companies in the country, and I'm sure one of those is TransDev. Is that correct? Yes. Including TransDev. So they're the ones that will most likely go ahead and bid, and they're the ones we will most likely be interviewing. So if TransDev does throw their hat in the ring again, which we can't stop them from doing, all we can do is make sure that we hold them to task.
If I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like more of the complaint is geared towards a certain individual than towards the company.
No, it's always a new individual. This is just a new guy. This is Reggie.
Okay.
Reggie. I don't even know. His name is not Reggie. His name is Reginald Caldwell. I don't know that man. Just be giving him a nickname. But this is a whole new person.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the company. It's the company. It seems
What's
like the culture of the company.
Okay.
What is our anticipated date for receiving the bids?
So we have a third addendum to release. So far, we've answered a little over 300 questions and sent out about 500 pages of data. This last addendum will provide the bid tabulation as well as the final due date. So I don't know that exactly, because our last call for questions, we still received over 100 more. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we get those answered and get those back out, but that will be the last addendum.
Okay.
We expect that to occur probably next week, but certainly we want to get that done as quickly as possible. We're just as interested as you is to get on with the next chapter. Whether we can get that done before December 30th is a question that I can't answer yet, but certainly we'll have protocols in place to make sure that we're good if we can't. But we certainly wouldn't extend this any longer than we have to.
Sure.
But there will certainly take a transition period if another company comes in. That takes time. Even if an incumbent stays, because of the new contract structure, that also takes time. So just letting you know.
And then I heard the chairwoman say, we would like some clarity about the wages that are offered to the operators. I think in that presentation, I think it would be useful to understand how that's structured into the O&M contract structure, because some city employees are paid directly by the city. That's not the case for our bus operators, and so the ability that we have to change that is different. So I think some clarity about how it works when you make that presentation is useful.
Yeah, most definitely. And just real quick, whoever steps into that spot acquires the existing CBA. So all of the obligations that are outlined within this life of that CBA are acquired by the new or whoever, whether it's the incumbent, whether it's a new one, they take that existing CBA on.
When is the CBA expire?
Collective bargaining agreement, which outlines the pay scale on an annual basis on who receives how much pay.
No, I know what that is. I said, when does it expire?
Oh, my fault. June 30, I believe, of 23. Sorry about that.
No problem. Any other questions? All right, next public comment is Ms. Keisha Woodard.
Keisha Woodard, nicesmooth8@aol.com. Thanks for your time. Just a few questions. I'm gonna be brief and quick. We getting ready to do, they did a run cut. I've been there, be 8 years in March. I gotta go back to working weekends. If you guys pass me your email, I will send this run cut over to you. We did have 79 runs that had weekends off. Now we got 56 runs with weekends off. So that means 33 drivers with 8 years or more with seniority got to go back to working nights and weekends to fit their stability, because you treat your drivers so unfair, so much favoritism. I understand everybody putting everything on COVID. COVID this, COVID that. Okay, yeah, we're still in a pandemic. I get that. But people still needs a job, and if you treat your people right and fair, they will come to work. Be it intimidated, just because I like you, you a trainer, you get special privileges, whatever. So you cutting the service back. What are we riding? You're not riding a bunch of people going to work. We're still doing free rides. For what? We're only sheltering the homeless, keeping them warm, keeping them cold. I mean, and then they still assaulting us, still abusing us. And I tell them real quick, the way y'all act is why we don't want to do this job anymore. Between the passengers and the management crew, people are saying, oh, I'll sit at home and do nothing. It's not fair. It's not right. It's frustrating. It's discouraging. I mean, you come to Go Raleigh to actually have a career like some of the retirees over there. Now you're at the point where, oh no, I don't even want to go to work. Maintenance man, 14 years of service in maintenance. 14 years, that's a lot of years. For him to leave and go to data, that should let somebody know that something ain't right. Oh, 27? 27 years. That should let somebody know that something ain't right. Then Mr. Eaton said, make more room for the ridership bus stops. They sleeping at the bus stops. It ain't like you picking up people. They telling us to open up the door, whatever. What are we opening up the door and stopping for when they got all their bags there, they stretched out on the bench? The people that really needs the bus can't even sit down. So this 96% he talking about, it must be homeless people. Because if you go downtown and if you ride some of these routes, they don't ride these buses with us to see. They just looking and speculating. No, most of these stops is homeless. You keep talking about this BTR, BRT, where are you gonna get the drivers? Wake Med 15, don't nobody want to run that. Why? They be assaulted. It's ugly over there. It's awful. I mean, I mean, it's just so much every month. I know you guys are tired of hearing it. It has to be some type of change. You have to fill us. You can't keep going on Mr. Eatman, because what is he doing? To me, selling some fictitious stuff just to keep TransDev in. This is a bad company for us. All the employees with these runs that we getting ready to start on September the 11th, they better get ready to hire some more people, because they already talking about quitting. Because nobody wants to do this. You've been with a company 8-9 years, and now you got to go back to fit their stability because they have poor management, and then management gonna say because they don't want to come to work. Well, if you treat people right, they'll come to work. You have to weigh it out. I'm not asking management to go way over and beyond for us. No, because some things we as drivers, we do as a mess up. But you don't have to be so hard on us. You don't have to. Why you suspending a driver and you know you short? Why can't you just talk to this driver? Why can't you give us a little leeway? We in a pandemic. You don't know what we going through. None of that. General manager, nothing to say, okay, we're going to give y'all a little downtime or a little break. Nothing. Everything is, we're getting you to the max. We're going by the CBA. You go by the CBA to punish us, but you don't go by the CBA for your agreement that we got in it on everything. It's like everybody crying out. Yeah, somebody got to help us, because this transit is going nowhere. Nowhere. Y'all can sit up here with all the plans you want, but it's going to go nowhere because of everybody's in cahoots with somebody to make something happen, and I'm going to get you in, and that ain't how you run a business at all. And right now, they better get ready, because when they post this and we start bidding, they finna fall off. You thinking overtime now, you got one run, the first run they got, you got 14 hours of overtime. That's 28 hours in 2 weeks on one run. Why you working somebody like that? Reminds me of back in the days, slavery. No, you're not gonna work me like that, because I'll find me another job. I'm just saying, something got to be done. This is pitiful at this job. Pitiful. When I tell you pitiful, it's pitiful. But anyway, thank you. I'm just so frustrated, like really frustrated. And I guess, some probably like, well, you're that frustrated, why don't you leave? Believe me, I have the resumes out. Thank you.
Honestly, don't even know what to say. Honestly, don't know what to say.
I would actually, on the actual run cut thing, obviously, I think we kind of told you about that. If you do cut service, if we do cut service back, and we don't want to cut span, that has to come generally from weekday, because we can reduce headways on the routes that aren't at capacity. Our radial core routes, such as Capitol, Wilmington, some of the others are generally at pre-pandemic ridership levels. So we can't really cut that service. So when you take that weekday service, peak service away, those routes that you're running extra service on, but it can carry that capacity with an hourly service per se. That does come from the weekday. If you do that on the weekends, you're already running an hourly service. So if you want to reduce span on weekends by a proportional purpose or amount, you can do that and make it equal so that you have an equal weekday and weekend reduction. But then you're going to actually lose span on weekends, and so that means you might not have service on the street during hours that you have service on the street on weekends now. I mean, that is a decision that can be made. If you don't want to have service on the street on Saturday and Sunday, that can be fixed. But that would require a reduction of service and no service on certain routes on Saturday and Sunday. And our goal through the process was to keep span but reduced headway on services that had the capacity to reduce that headway. Just wanted to relay our methodology. Obviously, I know that that's a lot to take in and think about there, but again, I just wanted to relay the methodology.
I think it's it's not the technicality of it. I think that she kind of expressed that this is happening. Of course, the reduction has happened. We have to go about it this way. That means that operators are going to have to work nights or weekends when they normally wouldn't have.
Yeah.
But to her point, that's because there's not enough operators. And to her point, that's because of how they're treated. So it goes back to.
Well, I mean, there is a national driver shortage. So I would say this is happening from New York City all the way to the West Coast. 75% of transit agencies in the United States have either delayed or cut service due to a driver shortage. Yes, American Public Transportation Association, we filled out a survey yesterday where they're starting to do in-depth surveys because the crisis nationally is so bad.
True, but.
I know. Well, we can say but all we want to,
Come on.
but there's a lot of sectors in this nation right now that are struggling, and certainly ours is one of them. It's not pretty. You can go to the New York Times, or you can go to the American Public Transportation Association,
No, it's
anywhere, and it's all over.
It's understandable that this is not a situation, the driver shortage is not a situation unique to Go Raleigh.
Is there a local perspective to that we need to improve on, and we need to step back and get things in order? Most definitely. But we are caught up in a larger
Right.
crisis as well.
There's no question that this is not an issue that's unique to us, the driver shortage. But also to her point, people show up to work and they're willing to go the extra mile when they're happy about working there.
Most definitely.
So, I mean, yes, this is something that's happening everywhere, but I think it's also just further exacerbating an issue that we've already had here.
Yeah.
So I have some disagreement for that. Yes, there's a national shortage. There's a national shortage on a lot of jobs which we don't pay for very well because we don't pay people very well. That's just a fact that we can't complain that no one wants to work at McDonald's when we're paying them $7.25 an hour and it costs $40 an hour to live in this county. So, but that aside, we are in this delta. We finally are starting people at a somewhat more reasonable amount of pay. When does this temporary reduction end? Because we keep throwing around temporary, but you and I know very well, things like stuff in this room was put in for temporary use that's been here for 20 years. So I'm very, very worried that we're going to go down this road temporarily, and we're going to be talking about this with the new management company about the fact that hopefully we'll get back up to speed in, May of next year. And that's not appropriate.
Maybe that should be a metrics on the contract that they help us get our ridership up so that we can go back to full service. Like that should be kind of something that is a thing that we're wanting for the new management company.
I wouldn't say that I know that answer. I would say our goal is to be staffed up by the first of next calendar year. And when I say the first of next calendar year, certainly the first quarter of 2023. We came into a COVID pandemic on March 13th, 2020. It was a Friday the 13th. And we thought that was temporary. Oh, this is just going to blow over. Would it be okay? It's not going to last long. So I think that now more than ever, we're in an environment that's certainly unpredictable. And that's scary to me too. I mean, I've done this for over 30 years. And, when you do something that long and you work at it and you think you're pretty decent at it, and then something comes along and crushes it, and you see stuff that you've built really hard and you've worked hard to get it there, and all of a sudden it starts going backwards, that's not fun to see. It's not fun to see. So it's frustrating here as well. And I know that everybody thinks, that just get it done, make it go away. But unfortunately, it's just not that easy. We're all just going to have to deal with it to a certain degree and work through it, and I'm committed to do that, and I'm going to make this work, and we're going to get to the other side, and we're going to have a great system, and we're going to get it back. But it's going to take everybody work together to do that. And that's all I can say is we're going to have to work together. This, if we haven't learned anything in the last 2.5 years, that we can't do it alone. So I just say let's work together and get this done.
I agree.
In that same vein, then, in January, for the January board meeting, can you please come to us with an update on where we are with that temporary shortage and your best prediction of where we are going and when we'll get back to service in the next couple months, and then thereafter a monthly update, because
Most definitely.
we need to be able to not. I understand the pressure that you're under. I totally get that, because you have all of this going forward, and there are reasons why pieces of this in this time frame at this moment are going to be really bad if they don't move forward the right way and the winds change. So from that perspective, I really want us to be able to hold everyone accountable, us too,
Yeah.
on this, and be able to say, this is going to change now, and not that we wake up, in December next year and we're like, oh, we still have this going temporarily.
Yeah. I mean, Ms. Woodard said, I wrote down some words: frustrating, discouraging. It is. It's frustrating, it's discouraging. But again, it's not going to get the best of us. We're gonna get through this. It's going to get better.
But
It's going to take some time. We do have the 2 largest classes, I think, of trainees scheduled that we've had since the pandemic started. One is actually supposed to start pretty soon, and they've got onboarding happening, or pre-onboarding happening with another one. So hopefully we're turning a corner. It's just going to take a little time. I know I sound like a salesman here that, it's going to, wait just a minute and the interest rate's going to go up. Keep your bond, keep that money where it's at. But honestly, I do feel that we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
I'm going to make a request that we have bus operator turnover rates for every agency that bids on this RFP. I think that as bare minimum, literal bare minimum data we can collect from them.
And I think that, to be honest, what can help, as much as we can't on this side our hands are tied, right, because of the collective bargaining agreement, because of the contracts, but that means that the culture has to change on the other side. An example of that is, not for nothing, he's not here to defend himself, but whenever Byron comes to the podium, it's I don't know, they lying. Every time we have a virtual meeting, I never heard they lying, that's not how it's happening, that's wrong.
Yeah.
It's a pushback. And if our operators are not happy, and those in control, those who are designated to help them get to that place to make sure that we have a successfully running system, then the culture has to change to where he's accountable, to where those that are over them can't just, if a operator says, this person is like, are you scared of me now? Well, the culture has to change that somebody go say something to him.
Yeah.
And not just be like, okay, we're not gonna say nothing. Okay, well, Byron, make sure you do better next time. We have to, and all of us doing our part, that has to be a part of it. Especially if we can't do too much when it comes to the contract. We can't control the contract, but we can control the culture.
Because at some point, we have to decide what the top of the organization is, right? Because the culture comes from the top. Is the top the board? Is the top y'all? Is the top Byron? Where's the top? Because that's where the culture comes from. The buck stops at the top, okay? And we need to influence the culture, because we will not have a bus system if we do not have employees, if we do not have bus operators. And so this is imperative. This is the meat of the whole, everything we do here is bus operators.
We want to be a system where the culture is the perfume comes from the head of the flower, not the dead fish stinks from the head down. And that's kind of where it feels, you know what I'm saying? Like, not for nothing, the coat, you know what I'm saying? Like you said, the head is what leads everything. So that has to change. And I think that that's something that, as we go into January 2023 is not something that can be changed tomorrow or September, but let's be committed, operators included, to, as we go into January 2023, that we adjust the culture here of Go Raleigh. And then whoever the contract is has to adjust to the culture and not the other way around. So let's do our part on that end, at least.
We also, and I know this is not the most popular line of all this, but we have to trust that the next union contract also covers the pieces that the drivers need, and covers the areas that they need to focus. Because one of the things that we found out early on was that the definition of seniority, based on what the drivers felt and what the contract said, were not always aligned. So we, in order for this to work, it's got to be everyone doing their pieces. So, and we'll help out as much as we can, but we can't help if there's no way for us to penalize the company if they're going against something that's not in black and white. Okay? That's all my piece.
Any other?
I just had one more. I agree with the big picture sentiments that you guys are saying. I think, as I said earlier, we can't disconnect the service reduction and the employee situation. I agree with Mr. Spencer that we need an and I brought this up in committee, we need an expiration date on this temporary reduction of a reevaluation date. I don't feel comfortable signing off on a no end in sight, because we see from the R line hearing today that no end in sight becomes permanent. We need the R line back. We need these other services back. My own bus that I use the 30-minute service on is getting cut in the service reduction. So I know that we need these services. But I am concerned that we're doing a service reduction, and I'm hearing from Ms. Woodard today that they're still cutting runs that have overtime built into them to the amount that she's saying. Those things don't align to, we're making service reductions and we're still scheduling overtime, and what % of the runs have overtime scheduled? That is really concerning to me. So it's a little bit in the weeds from where we just were, but I wanted to ask, how many of the runs have overtime? That's not how overtime is supposed to work. You don't get scheduled for overtime. So I'm really concerned with how that actually is comparing to what we're doing in terms of service, because I understand what you're talking about, span and depth of service, and where we decided in route committee was best to cut those things, but
Yeah,
it seems
generally
like there's
speaking, we haven't, just speaking from other properties, when I used to do this, I never really received a lot of complaints about guaranteed overtime. But at the same time, excessive guaranteed overtime can be a bad thing. So certainly we can look at that. And if people don't want overtime, I guess we could go there. You might have to cut more service, but that's something that could be done as well.
But
Yeah, I think-
guaranteed overtime is different than mandatory overtime. Are
Yes.
we?
We're not tripping off the overtime, but you got 152, 54 runs. A lot of those runs, you got the first run on the paper. I'm gonna email it to each and every one of you guys as soon as I leave here. The first run on the paper, 14.28 hours. That's 28 hours. That's almost a whole nother a week of work or 2 weeks of work. Okay, that's overtime, plus you got your 80. You look on further down the paper, you got another run, that's 12 hours. That's 24 hours in 2 weeks. So you working us like slaves, keeping us there 10, 11 hours on a bus, but you only, the leverage is not even weighing out. Why you working us like that? Then on top of that, we're working out here in 100-degree weather. You bring water downtown and you got coolers at the base, but you just bring the hot water and set it down there. Knowing that places are closed, we can't get in. We've been asking the operation manager to do a site report of give the union list of where we can stop in and use the restroom at. I have a medical condition. I went to my doctor and I told them, because I know what kind of management crew I'm working with, I need a doctor's note for this. I don't need nobody talking to me about no on-time performance, because when I got to go to the bathroom, I may have to walk a whole nother block. They're not even trying to get out to see anything to help us. But everything we do, you wanna discipline us, but we making you shine by driving these buses. You won't even bring the cooler downtown and put ice in it, and you got plenty of coolers at the base. But y'all in air conditioning all day, and you're not even putting us in consideration of some cold water. Cold water, you buy, but you set it on the floor in the break room, and it's 100 degrees outside. I was out of work for a whole week for dehydration, because I don't wanna keep constantly using the restroom, because I know I got passengers. I got to walk maybe a block to find somebody to let me use the bathroom, but y'all sitting in the office all day and you won't even get on the bus to try to see where we can go use the restroom. What facilities are open? As they say, we're still in COVID. It's ridiculous.
Thank you for sharing. I'm sort of speechless. I started by saying that I think that we know that there are things that are not great about the working conditions. There are things that are not right about what you're talking about. We talk about this every month, and I think we're doing everything we can to make sure that we have levers to be able to make sure that's not continuing to happen. So thank you guys for putting up with it. Thank you guys for staying with us while we fix that. But I would just say that I think that where I started was talking about overtime, and I think, you know, my bills get paid with my husband's overtime, so I know that some people want overtime. But having that set into the runs at that extreme level means that we're actually probably looking at, we probably don't even have the drivers to run the service that we're saying we have to run with this cut, and that concerns me.
Let us look at that. I haven't seen that. I mean, like I say, but I can't say that I've done a complete review of every single run.
Yeah.
I know how the schedule was put together, but again, I don't know at a run level. But I've got it down. Certainly, we can check on that.
Any other questions, y'all? Public comments always depress me. All right, let's get back to the agenda at 5:08 p.m. The Go Raleigh Performance Report Document Update. Oh, what is this?
All right. So is this,
No, it's the
oh, the
information
performance.
item, yeah,
Got it,
performance
sorry.
report.
So the performance report, the main report obviously is in the back of the agenda. We did provide some supplementals today. There were questions about missed trips. What you have before you are the trips for July as well as for August that are missed, along with a percentage of trips for that period. I would say that trips do vary pretty greatly by day. Some days are good days and some days are bad, but it does provide it for weekday, Saturday, and Sunday. What you see at the top line for the June is the total number. At the very top, you see total trips for that month, and August is to date. That's why that number is smaller. That 7,490 have been performed as of yesterday. So as you can see, for weekdays, we're missing about, out of total trips in the system, we're missing about 2.5% of total trips there, which is a large sum, quite honestly. Certainly, we should be well below 1% or 0.5%. That's even in the worst case scenarios. That's probably where we should be. And then Saturday and Sundays. Just because we run, again, that's where you start seeing our reduced schedule, and we don't have as much service that we can actually cut because the service route hours and trips are already lower than the weekday. That's where you see those percentages, which range from 7 to a high of 11%. So on weekends, it's getting to a point where it is purely critical. So. That is the report for today. If there's anything I can do to to break that down, I'll be happy to. The other item I have today, Mr. Sean Abrams was going to present, which was the Access Program. I'm probably not going to go into it a lot. I'm just going to tell you what it is. But first of all, I'll answer any questions regarding the trip report.
I have a question. When we say that, when we're in this like reduced trip time period, is that included in the 2%, or we are using the reduced trips as the baseline?
Now, so this is all trips today.
The
So this
reduced
does not
schedule
reduce.
Doesn't go in
This-
until September 11th.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is not reduced. This is counting everything that we do. So out of, a little over 20.5 thousand trips, we missed 512. That's not good.
Have we, in our new RFP, do we have percentages for like trips that, like limits that we will start charging them?
Yeah, so we had a list within the RFP, and remember, we shared that back when we did the original one, that entire metric of what we called potential performance indicators. And that's what you tie your liquidated damages or other types of incentives or disincentives in order to reach those targets. But yes, they're in there.
My understanding is that with the new not the fee for service, sorry, I can't remember, keep them all straight. The new type of contract we're doing, it's easier to penalize the contractor for missing trips.
Yeah, so that runs two ways. You got to understand that right now, those 512 trips that did not run, in some way, they still have a value, because that could have been because the bus was sitting there or whatever. So certainly under an O&M contract, there's two ways that hits the contractor. Number one is if they don't perform an hour, they don't get paid for that hour. So whatever that unit cost is for that hour plus, their fixed cost plus the cost plus profit, they don't get paid for whatsoever because they didn't perform the hour.
Okay.
The other one is if they don't meet their metric for percentage of trips performed, then they actually get penalized as well on a daily basis. So that's like a daily fee of not meeting performance standard. So there's, a bunch of different ways that you're actually going to look at
What's
that.
the threshold for that
I
second
can't
day?
remember. I'd have to look back at the sheet. My apologies.
I think what's concerning to me is that Sunday and Saturday are but Sunday already in July, we missed 246 trips, which is basically 10.5%. But it's year to date, month to date in August, and we've already surpassed that on Sunday.
Yeah, our percentage is higher. We've missed 68 in August so far.
Right,
But
that's what I'm saying.
we're at 11.5%. So as a percentage of where we are to date, we are higher than where we are on track for the full month of July. That is
Right.
correct.
So I'm just how do we're just going to be looking at it and seeing, but it looks like so far the trend is concerning.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And,
To put it like
and so, and again, that's the reason for the reduction. You can advertise the reduction. You can build confidence in the system by at least what you say you're doing, you're doing. It's a double-edged sword, I realize, but at the same time, you would rather have confidence than you would additional service.
I have a question that's kind of not related to this, but kind of. So we've agreed to be fare free through the end of the year?
Correct.
When are we considering bringing the fares?
Fiscal year.
Fiscal year,
Correct.
which ends July?
June 30.
June. When are we we need to discuss then about when coming close to that to bringing the rates back, or can we possibly talk about it sooner?
About bringing,
The rates back for the buses?
that would certainly be your decision along with a recommendation to council. And you could do that at any time.
I think it's a discussion to have prior to our conversation with council, and the reason why I'm saying it is, from what I'm hearing a lot from the operators, is that now it's shifting to where homeless people are on the bus. Whereas before, even though it was just $1 and some change, that $1 and some change was a big enough barrier. But having people on the bus, and that's not saying that we don't want to care for people who are homeless and in need, but it puts our operators and other riders in danger if we start filling our buses up with people that aren't going, they're not taking the bus to get somewhere, they're taking it for comfort, for rest, for shelter. And I think that just with the hot days, with more and more going on, I think it just causes a higher chance of something happening. You know what I'm saying? Like, to have that element on the bus, to be honest. And I mean, I understand us maybe doing something else, like cards for people who need them. But it's my suggestion to bring it as a conversation to the board for us to discuss bringing the fees back.
Well, I mean,
Already said till June 30th of '23.
But I'm saying we can amend that. We don't have to.
Council.
City council has, like,
Yeah.
we'd have to, like,
It would be a recommendation from this
Right.
body to council, and then council
Would choose.
Yeah, they would choose whether they wanted to reinstate fares or not. Maybe something you want to I'm sorry, but take it to policy and finance,
I'm not saying let's make a decision today. I'm just
and
throwing it out there for
and
us
we'll
to
certainly provide some
think
pros
about
and
it.
cons on that, as we've
Yeah.
already been working on internally on what are the pros, what are the cons for reinstating fares, and
Just putting it out there for us to think about it, because I've actually been thinking about it for a little bit, especially when the operators started talking more and more about being concerned about assaults. And I saw a picture of a man down at Moore Square with a gun, and the police were searching him, and all of these situations. I don't know if he was homeless or what, but I think they got him before he got on the bus. Who knows where that was gonna go? You know what I'm saying? With all the things that we're hearing, I just feel like if we're asking for radios and that takes a jump, or partitions and that takes a jump, then maybe this is something that we can do to provide some measure of security to our operators if that's something that they feel like they need.
well, I mean, we're certainly, with hourly service, we're going to increase the number of, we're going to lessen the number of people that are relying on the bus that are general citizens. So, I mean, hourly service is not reliable. I mean, let's just say you get out of work for, at your job at 7:15 and the bus just left. Like, you're going to wait until 8:15?
No, I understand
So
that, but if I'm a
it's-
homeless person, then none of that matters to me.
Well, no. But I guess what I'm saying is that the population as a percentage is going to be higher of unhoused folks riding the system. So I think it's going to become more predominant over the next couple months.
Right,
Um,
right.
And so I think it's appropriate for us to have that conversation. I think there's also a political end that we need to have that is best to discuss in committee than in this
I'm just
board.
throwing it out there for us to maybe start kicking it around in our committees, or just having the idea of the conversation, if that's something that we may start considering to bring back. And maybe the fees that we're collecting could go to help pay, you know what I'm saying? Like, if we're having issues with that type of thing, or service money, or essential worker, whatever, the money that we're not charging people, if we start charging it, maybe could help our operators a little more too.
Respectfully, I think we need to discuss it, because I personally don't think that it is fair for the people that need to ride the bus, that are riding the bus right now, to bear the brunt of that cost and the cost of not having other things dealt with properly, that we could spend city money to help our homeless population, houseless population, to support our bus operators and to do those things. I don't think it's fair for the average bus rider. And I also don't think that there have always been houseless people on our buses, even when we had day passes. So anyways, I think we need to have a lot of discussion about it, because I think we need to know what the real trade-offs are around the discussion. But I think it's a serious conversation.
I agree, and I think our houseless population needs support, but Go Raleigh is not that place. And I think that, yes, there are always going to be homeless people, because not all homeless people have enough dust in their pockets. You know what I'm saying? So somebody can get the funds, but it reduces the barrier if there's no funds. So the people who don't have that, the ones that will ride the bus all day, you know what I'm saying? The ones that are doing it just for shelter, yes, there's help that's there's help that's needed, but we have to, as we're talking about protecting our operations. That's just I'm not trying to debate it here, but I'm just saying it is a conversation. It's multi-layered, but I think that there may be multiple benefits especially when it comes to our operators, or even asking them how they feel about bringing the fares back. And that could be a part of the conversation that's talked about in committee. Are we done with the performance?
Just real quick, this spreadsheet here, which is very, very small, we will break the financial and the ridership into two different pages in the future. But that is a snapshot of our paratransit program. We do provide up to 1,400 trips a day, closer probably to 15 some days now, for persons with disabilities within the city of Raleigh that are qualified under our Americans with Disabilities Act transportation. This program, as you can see with our existing free fares, is growing between 35 and 20% monthly. So it is a fast-paced growth program. You do see some financial figures there, as well as, again, ridership. Majority of our trips on our program, our Go Raleigh Access program, are provided by local taxi companies. We do not hold contracts with those companies. These are brokered services, so those trips are performed at will by the providers, which makes it a brokerage. Again, we will be talking much more about the Access program in the coming months. So we wanted to go ahead and start making sure that you are aware of this report and that you have the ability to look over this. We'll get this out, like I say, in two different reports as part of your performance packet in the future. One will be operational and one will be financial. But again, we just wanted to make sure that you're aware of this very large Americans with Disabilities Act transportation option that we provide. ADA was a mandated service for public transportation back in 1990. It went through a revision around 2000, I think, 8, or no longer than that, about 2012 or so. And we have our current legislation. Generally, it states that if you cannot physically board a fixed route transit bus and you need to, and you go for a functional assessment, it's not based on a designated disability by state or federal government. It's assessment by the system. So as Go Raleigh Access determines that you cannot board a fixed route transit bus because you can't make it to the stop, or maybe you have an inaccessible stop near your house that doesn't have sidewalk and you're limited to a wheelchair, then we will provide curb-to-curb or sometimes door-to-door transportation for you. So again, a very large program here. We'll be talking about that more in the future. We're looking to modernize this program with software, along, with options for our clients to use everything from call centers to smartphones to book trips, track trips, and also for us to have better data analytics as it relates to our services we provide. So again, I just wanted to foreshadow a lot of work in this arena. Historically, and again, my apologies, Joshua, the Access program has fallen under the Finance and Policy Committee because it really is meeting federal policy is the biggest thing. But unless somebody wants to do something different, we have historically taken the Access program not issues, but changes and programmatic advancements to the Finance and Policy Committee. And unless it's directed different by the board, that's what we'll do this time.
Thank you for that. Okay with it being in policy department?
It's fine.
All right.
He's got something to do. A lot to do.
We'll keep it there.
Is
then.
this
Thank you
related
for
to
that.
the paratransit conversation with some of the BRT stuff as well, though? Because we've been talking about different technologies for outer Wake County and things like that in route committee. So are these topics somewhat related?
So microtransit isn't federally mandated. It's a different way to provide service for areas that aren't officially served by deviated fixed route or fixed route.
Mm-hmm.
But it does follow the same principles, and a lot of times it uses similar or the same software.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is we will be putting this under the arena of our microtransit RFP that we are, interviewing firms for right now. So we did put in a piece of that was ADA related. So again, we're looking for ways that we may be able to integrate our existing database software and scheduling software with technologies that can integrate so that it helps our client base book, track, and determine when they have trips.
That makes sense. And then I'm also just curious because you said that people who functionally can't get on the bus, but then also might have accessibility issues with the stops that are near where they're going or live. I'm wondering if we have information on that that can help us target which stops that we're improving.
So the short answer is yes, but it is in development to a greater extent. We are doing a complete assessment of all 1,400 bus stops and a catalog assessment of all amenities associated with that stop will be in a GIS layer. So you'll be able to tell, does it have a shelter, bench, light, sidewalk, curb cut?
I think cross-comparing that to the database of people that currently can't
Yes.
get on
yeah.
would be a good thing and might need to involve route. That was really my only reason for bringing it up right now.
Well, speaking of which, that's a great segue. Are we done with the report? That's a great segue to our route committee report.
Okay, so the two presentations I asked staff to put together for us were the Southern BRT update and the reduction in service. Het got dressed up just for us, so he's going to do the BRT update.
Has 3 slides. No, I'm just kidding.
This is something we've been looking forward to, so.
All right. Thank you, Chair and RTA members. Again, Het Patel, Transportation Transit, presenting an update on the Southern Corridor Small Starts ratings. We always start our slides with the update on the overall program and where the status is for each corridor. Again, New Bern Avenue is the most advanced at 90% design with potentially construction shifting into that early 2023 timeframe. So I need to update that slide actually, and the anticipated service by the end of 2024, early 2025. Southern Corridor and Western Corridor are both at about 10% design, with going into trying to complete final design by 2024 on those corridors. And then the Northern Corridor, David mentioned earlier in his presentation for the work plan that we started the major investment study, which is a planning phase for that corridor to identify routes out to Midtown Raleigh and Triangle Town Center. So a background on the Southern Corridor. Again, I'm not going to read each and every bullet here, but there has been a lot of action that has happened with councils endorsing a locally preferred route on the Southern Corridor, which was in April of 2021. We have the Southern Corridor LPA, which is the South Wilmington Street to South Wilmington Street extension into Garner Station Boulevard, getting down to Rupert Road. In the summer of 2021, the Capital Area MPO adopted that LPA in their Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is the long-range transportation plan for the region. And then the Federal Transit Administration accepted the project in their Small Starts project development process in the summer of 2021 as well. And at that point, we began the preliminary design and environmental work for the Southern Corridor. So again, an overview, we're at 10% design for the corridor. It extends from downtown Raleigh to Rupert Road in Garner at the Walmart Supercenter. It is 5 miles with about 10 stations. 9 of the stations would be new station constructions for the Southern Corridor. 1 station is planned as part of the New Bern Avenue corridor, so it would utilize that station at Go Raleigh Station on Wilmington Street. It would require 7 buses, which is also similar to what we had on New Bern Avenue. Again, timeline, we began preliminary design in the fall of 2021. We're currently at about 10% design with the anticipated FTA capital investment grant small starts ratings submission at the end of this month. David mentioned he didn't know the date. The date is August 26th, which is a Friday. So that is the deadline to submit the ratings application for the Southern Corridor.
That was close.
You were in the range. So in terms of what we have developed from a budgeting perspective for the project, we've identified the running way treatments. Again, this is what the dedicated lanes would look like within each segment on the Southern Corridor. So in segment 1, which is downtown Raleigh, Wilmington Street, and Blunt Streets, And along South Wilmington Street from Martin Luther King Boulevard to City Farm Drive and Keeter Center Road is what we call the right business access and transit lanes, RBAT. Again, that is the lanes being on the right side of the roadway, and cars are allowed to come in and out of those lanes if they're making a turn into a driveway or coming out of a business or a cross street, but they're not supposed to drive in that lane for continuous blocks at a time. Segment 2 is the median running transit way. Again, this is the more premium level of transit service that we can provide with dedicated bus lanes in the median, which are physically separated from the general purpose traffic. And then segment 3, again, is the mixed traffic operations along Garner Station Boulevard in the town of Garner's jurisdiction. So again, just some visuals for what that really looks like. Segment 1 with the right bat, you have the bus running along the right side of the roadway. The graphic to the top right is the downtown streets on South Wilmington Street and South Blunt Street. And the graphic at the bottom of the slide is South Wilmington Street between Martin Luther King and City Farm Road, Keeter Center Drive. So we're showing those dedicated bus lanes along the right side of the roadway there. We do have planned bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure along the entire corridor. Earlier this year, the City of Raleigh Council adopted a UDO text change that added these busway cross sections to the UDO, and then followed that with a comprehensive plan amendment that actually maps the busway cross sections onto the BRT corridors, again, which identifies a preference for separated bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And so where we do have right-of-way within the segments, segment 1 or segment 2, we do try to accomplish a physically separated bicycle lane and sidewalk along the entire corridor with the dedicated bus lanes. Where there are right-of-way constraints and there's pinch points, we do kind of pinch into the 10-foot multi-use paths on both sides of the roadway. Again, segment 3 is just mixed operations along Garner Station Boulevard. So what does the small starts process look like? Again, we went through this for New Bern Avenue, so I won't spend a whole lot of details here, but for the southern corridor, just highlighting that those grayed out items on step 1 are things we have completed to date. We had the PD application submitted to FTA, we have our locally preferred alternative selected, and we have the local funding commitment from the Wake Transit Plan identified. So the next step in the process is to submit the ratings application to determine federal eligibility for the project, continue our environmental review with the NEPA and North Carolina SHPO coordination, continue working with the NCDOT on achieving our third-party agreements, and then completing engineering, design, and utility coordination, so getting to that final design point on the corridor as well, so that we can get to the step 2, which is getting a full funding grant agreement. And as David alluded to, we are getting close to that on New Bern Avenue, hoping that that gets done at sometime in this month for New Bern Avenue. So again, what does the small starts ratings do? It identifies the federal participation for the project. It defines the overall project scope, which means the length, the mode, which is bus rapid transit, and the 2 termini points, downtown Raleigh and Rupert Drive, Walmart Supercenter, and town of Garner. So those things get locked in. What it does not do is lock in any of the final design elements or station location. That information can change as we advance to 30% design and as we advance further into final design. That's when some of those items will get finalized. But what it does, again, do is finalize those cost assumptions that we're submitting to the Federal Transit Administration for the project. And the cost assumption identified through the Wake Transit Plan for the Southern Corridor is, again, 50.6% of the funds coming from the local Wake Transit Plan funds and the 49.4% coming from the FTA Small Starts Capital Investment Grant Program. So that breakdown for the project comes to about 85.9 million from FTA, 88 million from the local Wake Transit Plan funds, with a total of 173 million. One thing that I had mentioned earlier in the slides for the locally preferred alternative, there is a new roadway facility planned for the project, which is the South Wilmington Street extension. So that has been on the City of Raleigh Streets plan for quite some time. In the Southern Gateway Corridor study, it was a recommendation that that street would also include the dedicated bus lanes for the bus rapid transit. So the dedicated bus lanes and the bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is eligible for the total FTA CIG project costs, but the general purpose lanes for that extension are not eligible for a FTA CIG eligible project. So that's why that's been broken down separately and has been identified. Local funds are anticipated to cover the costs for the general purpose lanes, which would come from a future bond or other sources. So what do we anticipate for ratings on the Southern Corridor? Again, the rating is broken down into two categories: project justification and financial commitment. We anticipate to get a medium on project justification and a high on the financial commitment, with having more than 50% of the financial commitment coming from local funds. So that overall anticipated rating would be medium high, and that is what we received on the New Bern Avenue corridor. We received a medium high rating as well. And that is my last slide, so I'm happy to answer questions. Thought I'd be faster than that.
Thank you. You did a great job. Anybody have any questions on the Southern BRT update? That means you explained it very thoroughly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
wanted to add just a couple things of context that we found out in conversation with Head at Route, that there's a dedication to separated bike lanes along this whole thing, which he mentioned, and that there's work being done on a policy level to work on enforcement of bike lanes and the red lane enforcement. So the things that you see in terms of the dedicated lanes, that's being done. That's something that will also affect land use. So we should probably keep an eye on that. And that this is just a lot of work's gone into planning this, not only for the now, but looking ahead towards how Garner may change with stuff, or how we might change, and making it flexible. So it's a really good work by Het and his team.
Thank you.
I'll just add to repeat what I said at committee, which is I want to see the street trees get there. New Bern, Southern, all of them. We really need to push DOT on making sure that we have shade for people that are walking on those separated sidewalks.
How is the equitable development around transit applied to the Southern Corridor?
So the final reports from the Equitable Development on Transit project are pretty much there at this point. The applications would happen through the station area planning exercise. So on New Bern, the station area planning report has also been advertised for final public comments, I guess, at this point, and it's going to council, I think, later this year. We have not initiated the Southern Corridor station area planning work right now. That is something that is funded and is going into a consultant selection process before that work begins, but that's how it would be applied to the project.
And also from a policy standpoint, fund eligibility would occur at 60% design. Basically what the city did was look at things like New Bern Avenue, Dix Park. When those major elements reach 60% design, they said, they're eligible for funding, because once you reach 60%, you generally are at a point where you know that you're going to push through the project, and that project will be completed at some point. So I think from a policy standpoint, that's what is currently being looked at as a kind of the start point for eligibility.
For equitable development, to start applying that?
Not for equitable development. I'm sorry. I was kind of talking about the public project funding.
Okay. No, I was meaning equitable development.
Yeah. So, I think the overall toolkit and policies that came out of the equitable development around transit projects would be applied through the lens of station area planning and the recommendations that come out of station area planning and land use. And so that would happen, again, in the next year and a half when the project kicks off for station area planning on the southern corridor. But like David said, some of the additional recommendations that came out of that required funding, and the funding piece would come in at the 60% design level.
Was that where we were with New Bern when we started applying equitable development? I don't think we were at 60%.
So New Bern, a lot of these processes were in development parallel with New Bern. So New Bern was beyond 60% before, project or the public project funding was available. As far as the equitable development piece, that study was obviously done also during the design of New Bern Avenue, and was certainly thought about, as part of the station area planning as well. But I don't know exactly when.
I mean, I would say as the station area planning work was happening on New Bern Avenue, we were in that 60% to 90% design range. So it was kind of overlapping, as David said. I think one thing that has happened recently from a equitable development around transit outcome perspective is the city council did endorse the transit overlay district for the southern corridor in July. Which was the preliminary application of the TOD overlay, the text change that happened with the transit overlay district, and then the application of that on the southern corridor in July of this year. So the station area planning process will dive deeper into the specific station areas and the quarter-mile, half-mile radius, and look at more land use recommendations specifically around the stations, but this was the first pass on that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Just to tag on to that, I think one of our work plan goals for this year is a little bit more communication between planning and transportation. I know you guys working on that on the staff side, but I think between the boards and commissions, that's also important. So where we put the stations from a transportation perspective has a transportation value, but there's also land use input that needs to be made. So I think what we can do better on Southern than we did on New Bern, and I don't know if this is what you're suggesting, but I think we can do better about how we think about where we put those stations, knowing that we have the TOD in place already, and the whole corridor will respond. I think we really need to talk about where the stations actually get put matters from a land use perspective.
And not just across all the BRTs. Of course, I'm not going to be the dead horse about New Bern, but as we develop it, just being mindful of that. To me, it's not just the stations. It's going to be a lot of development, right? This is over $100 million project. So in that, we want to make sure that as we're developing out, we're making sure that we are being responsible about the other businesses, residents, all of that. We don't want to, I know that we're trying to bring in new residents and all of that, and the area is growing, but we want to make sure that we take care of the people who have taken care of Go Raleigh all this time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great, cool. Next item is the presentation on the service reduction. We've talked a little bit about this coming into play, so I think the presentation will probably be fairly quick. It was fairly quick at the committee meeting, but
I didn't load that one, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I didn't load that one from
No, you're all right. Well, then let's talk about it.
My apologies.
We talked at the committee meeting about the fact that service reduction was happening because the mistrips that we've got in front of us, they're about 150 to 200 per week. That's out of 1,000 trips per day. So we're seeing these actual percentages on our page here. What we were told was that recruiting has picked up since raising starting salary. And so we're kind of in that delta right now where we don't have staff. We've clearly had a problem treating staff, so that's an issue. But also that because of that, we are in need of reducing service by a significant amount on 11 routes. Most of that service is going 30-minute to 1 hour service. The 19 is getting reduced from 15-minute to 30-minute. Some of those routes are Wake Transit funded. However, conveniently, the Wake Transit TPAC waived some of those requirements at the last meeting, so it doesn't look like Go Raleigh will get fined or removed from funding for that reduction in performance. There's the overall ridership is at about 80% of pre-pandemic totals. So while there are definitely routes that are quiet, we're moving a lot of people to and from jobs and other things like grocery stores and whatnot. So this is a significant hit to ridership, and whenever you reduce service, whenever you change people's routines, they will find other ways. So some people will be fine with our service. Some people, or fine or have no other choice, I should say. Some people will find other options, whether that's carpooling with others, whether that's Ubering, whether that's biking. So when service comes back, it's going to be a while before that service comes back to a point where it's performing the way it was even at this point. So we are quite literally hurting ourselves. The other impacts are climate-wise. I think you mentioned that David had mentioned the grid, the metric that they have of how much has been saved. That's going to be a factor. And then in terms of greenhouse gases, and then just in general, the fact that this is not within the scope of what we're doing with the Wake Transit Plan and why we're spending $100 million a year on expanded transit. This does not look so good, especially in a year that we're asking taxpayers to invest more money for infrastructure for parks, and we're having trouble keeping this up. All that said, hopefully, and we'll find out January how temporary this is. So that is the update on service reduction. There was a quick update on the O&M RFP, just that they're dealing with hundreds of questions, and that the new due date is set for August 31st to get responses and more questions and stuff like that done. And that there was also an update on the microtransit RFQ. There are 4 firms, I guess 6 firms applied, 4 firms that are moving forward. Most of the options are software-based. There's one option locally that is going to be software and vehicles, which is amazing. There's we're trying to Routing Company, which is one of the one of the 4, is proposing a local DBE sub. So we highlighted that, and that's something that's very attractive. So we will watch that come through over the next month. So that's what happened in route.
Thank you very much for that route update. Any questions from anyone about anything?
Cool.
Awesome. Is there anything else from you, David?
No report.
All right. Well,
Did we get an answer about the radios?
oh, that's right. Corey did.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I just remembered that.
Oh, Councilman Branch wanted to know, he said that he felt like, from what he heard, that the radios, the closed sequence is best practice, but he was open to something different and wanted to know if that was the case. Is that
That's
the
what
same
I'm
thing he told you?
hearing.
Yeah.
So the system is currently closed, as you stated. From what we're seeing from a national best practice, that is the best way to perform the radios. But certainly what we can do is we can prepare a report for this board as well as council if anyone wants additional information. We've been trying to pull information from Transportation Research Board, TRB, which they do a lot of reports on technology and things of that nature. And when CAD AVL came out, that was in one of their reports as a best practice for technology. So again, we can certainly write that up. That's a tough one because when you start dealing with radios and operational issues, then fundamentally you're dealing with the safety plan of an agency. And so we really have to make sure, certainly within our contract, we want agencies to follow OSHA and be safe, but they have to make that determination on what are their processes for that. There's probably some, amount of pros and cons to each, open and closed. But like I say, what we have seen nationally is that the closed is the most common standard and what most follow. But again, we'll be glad to write something up and present and hopefully, at least present a national view of how that's operated.
Okay, yes. I would ask that we please do, and as we get the research on the closed mics, can we also get research on the open mics and get pros and cons for both? So that we can make a decision based on not just what we're currently doing, but what we may be able to do better.
Can I ask, does that mean that this is something that we can suggest change if that's the will of the board?
I would say that this is something you can suggest change.
Okay.
Right, which is why I'm thinking Corey is asking. Because while we could suggest change, council has a better position of pushing the change.
Yeah, I think that, and I also would say that I think that open radio communication is a bus operator issue and a safety issue. I also think it's a customer service issue because much of what the bus drivers communicate across that chatter is service to riders and connection to riders, particularly as we talk about a service reduction. It becomes much more important to make that transfer. And like from experience of riding on the bus, much of what gets discussed that has been cut out by the closed system is that loose exchange that assists riders in making those transfers. So I think it's not just safety, it's also customer service.
Yeah.
And to be honest, with everything going on with our operators, if there's something we can give them and it's not that big of a deal, you know what I'm saying, to shift it. Yeah, it may be national best practice, best is relative, but if we're always telling them no every time they have a problem and they come up, which is what I feel like we keep doing, no with your routes, no, you know what I'm saying? If there's something we can give them that can look like goodwill and make it seem a little more balanced, and if it's not gonna hurt anything, then,
Yeah, I would just warn that, certainly if it's a safety security situation, then that's open as well. So again, those are trade-offs that you have to make and understand. So there's a lot to think about there. We'll certainly write something up. I would just ask that the board certainly not take that lightly. I think that it is up to an individual company to make those final, judgment calls, but I certainly think that they would value the opinion of this board and council as well.
thank you. Well, are all hearts and minds clear? I'm sorry, that fell over me. Are all hearts and minds clear at this time?
I just have one thing I want to be added to committee agenda. I think that it's time in the BRT design to talk about the future route connections to the BRTs. We're starting to place stations on Southern and Western, and I think that we need to spend some time in the coming months in route committee for what routes that connect to the BRT lines look like, whether they're things parallel or perpendicular or loops or what they are. I think it's time to start looking
Feeder.
at that in committee.
The feeder routes, you mean the things coming in?
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's high time. That'd be great. And if we know Head at all, he's been thinking about this, so.
And definitely at least if we can start with New Bern, since that's the closest.
Absolutely.
And then we
Yeah.
can kind of use that as a metrics going forward. You got it. That's why they pay you the big bucks, Hat. All right. So thank you. This is where we close the meeting, call the meeting to conclusion of the Raleigh Transit Authority meeting for August 11th at 5:55 PM. Thank you.